Hello, everybody. Welcome to Elevate 805. My name is Cameron Dennis, one of the core organizers of this fantastic event, and I'm here with Dr. Rosanne Siino. She is currently a professor at Stanford and at UCSB in the technology management program, so very local, even though she's currently based in the Bay Area. She's down in Santa Barbara all the time, and she is a rock star, has been researching wrote her PhD dissertation in 2008 about remote work and how to, optimize virtual management. So it's an honor to have her here. Today we'll be talking about sort of how to, again, sort of optimize remote work. I'll be discussing later around some of the tooling that we can use to do this. Specifically, everyone's using GoodSpace, Slack, Discord, chat, email. How can we sort of put it together to make it seem like we are sorry, I just got noted that there's a little bit of echo. If there is echo, just make sure that you type it into the chat bar here would be great. So great. I will be a little more quiet. So yeah, let's just get started. Actually, before getting started, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Cameron Dennis. I currently run a nonprofit where we teach people about creating a user-owned internet. I'm going to take my mic out.
I can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me? Test, test. Dr. Siino, can you hear me? Great.
Yes.
Can you start with your presentation? I'm going to get these technical difficulties figured out.
Okay, I'm not on screen right now, so how do I do that?
Dr. Siino, can you hear me?
I can.
Great.
But I am not. I'm not seeing the screen right now. How do I have to log back in?
Just refresh the page. That's what I would recommend.
Okay, will do.
Sorry for the technical difficulties, everybody. I will get the audio fixed shortly. So while perfect intro, okay. Well, in the meantime, while she's getting that figured out, I'll just.
I hope I'm.
Yes,
there.
you are there.
Yes, you are there.
Continue.
Yay. Good deal. And you can hear me okay? I hope so. Okay. Well, I'm Dr. Siino. I have to say that it's kind of exciting to talk about this topic. I did research on this topic back in 2006 to 2008 as part of my dissertation work at Stanford University. But what's interesting about the work is the reason I went back to get my PhD later in life is because I was on the founding team of Netscape back in 1994. And I ended up as a pretty young puppy trying to manage people all over the world. And what I found about it was incredibly difficult. Not being face to face with people makes it hard to bond with them. And then trying to do, the video conferencing technology back then was really bad. Not that it's great now, but sometimes it was even worse. And much of what we were doing was conference calling. And the amount of misinformation, the amount of times that caused trouble in smooth communication was just phenomenal. So I went back to get my PhD to study the problem of remote work. Why is it that trying to work over distance is so darn frustrating? And one of the things that I found back then, and it seems to be, completely relevant and happening again now, is that part of what happens for us is that we as humans are social creatures. Not a big surprise, right, guys? I mean, we're wired to be face to face. We're not wired to be looking at screens and talking to each other over screens. Now, we've adapted to that to a degree, but in point of fact, as social creatures, there's a lot that gets lost when we're trying to talk and bond with people over distance, or even try to conduct a meeting over distance, because so much of that spirit of what happens face to face doesn't work. And that's apart from the technical troubles. So let me tell you a little bit of, just to set it up, about what it is that is true about us as humans when we're face to face. There's this term called social contagion, or social excitement, that's been found to operate not just among humans, but among apes and other animals too, that when we get in a group, we get more excited, we get more physically activated. What that does for us as humans when we're together is it engages us in the interaction. It engages us to what's happening in front of us. Now, when we're at a distance, what we haven't been able to replicate very well is the experience of feeling each other's presence. For example, as far as I know, I could be talking to an empty screen. I know that's not true, but it feels like that to me. So I don't have that sense of, I'm talking to a group of people and they're responding to me, and I can't then gain energy from that interaction. On top of that, thank you for telling me you're here. I appreciate that you're here. That's a good thing. But part of what happens is, on top of the social loss, then we also have this problem of technical troubles. Back when I was studying this in 2007, I watched 100 meetings. I know that's crazy, right? Like, I watched face-to-face meetings and those that are taking place on video conference and conference calls. And what I found is, on those that were not face-to-face, up to a third of the meeting was spent talking about technical problems. So if you had an hour meeting, at least 20 minutes would be spent talking about the problems of hearing one another, the problems of people being on mute, the problems of people coming in late and clicking on and off and not knowing who was there, and all kinds of things. Now that I'm in Zoom meetings all the time, the same things are happening. So the technology's improved, but the problems of us trying to catch up as humans to the problems of both social, emotional stuff that goes on for us and the technical stuff is all adding up. There's been a few articles, one that was in the New York Times just last week about Zoom fatigue, which seems to be the new term for the problems that we have in trying to deal cognitively, just cognitively, not emotionally, with all of the troubles that happen in trying to have a meeting over Zoom or over any kind of technology like this. Why is that true? Why would we have fatigue? Well, let's dive into that, and then we'll start talking about some solutions for it. One of the things that happens when we're on these kinds of calls or trying to do this stuff over distance is, not only, as I said, do I lack getting any feedback from you, but I can't tell if you're on mute. I can't tell if you've dropped off. And so, there's a way that I'm constantly trying to do work in my own head about like, can they hear me? What's happening? And then if you're breaking up at all in your response to me, so we're trying to have a Zoom meeting and I can't quite hear you, I start paying attention to the breaks in the technology, to the lags in the video, to the lags in the sound. And all of that requires me to work harder to understand you, to figure out what's going on, to sort of smooth out the interaction so that I feel comfortable in this interaction. After you do that for about, a half hour to an hour, you're going to get tired. There's just no way you're not. And then to be doing it on and on and on through the day, it's no wonder that many of us by the end of the day feel completely fried. Okay, so that's the bad news. That's what's happening for us, is we're trying to live in a world where we're doing something kind of unnatural, and the technology doesn't help us in this case, because there are going to be problems with the technology. That's just a fact right now. So let's talk about what we can do to try to fix this situation. It's awful for all of us, so we just have to admit that and move on from there. So there are luckily things we can do. One is to remember that, this is a meeting that or this is the way we're going to try to do our work. And we're going to try to make the best of it that we can by putting more structure on it than we might normally. And doing things that might seem a little bit like we're, I don't know what you want to say, like overcorrecting. But I think what you'll find is that the overcorrections are actually not too much overcorrections. It's exactly what we need. So one of the things I advise teams when I'm giving talks to various companies is that we start by, as the leader, when you're leading meetings over distance, to make sure that you are sending out agendas. Simple thing, right? But sending out an agenda. What is it we're talking about today? And when are we talking about it? How long are we spending on each issue? Make sure that everybody knows what's going to come, so they aren't feeling like they're groping in the dark. The next thing to do is make sure you're not the only person speaking. So here I am like hogging the stage for a while. It's actually better if you have an hour meeting to break it up. Give other people roles in the meeting. Let other people do the talking. This does a couple things. One is that it breaks it up for everybody. And it's not just if I have a bad connection that you're having to deal with me for an hour. But it's also that it engages other people on the call. Now, part of what I found in my research and has been validated over and over is that you have to, you have to draw people into a meeting, right? If we were face to face, I would be greeting you. We would be chatting before the meeting. You would feel like I knew you were there. But not being face to face, it's easy to come in and feel like you're invisible. If nobody's talking to you, or if nobody's asking you any questions, or if you don't have a role in the meeting. So the key is, can we give people roles in the meeting as part of what we do, or ask them questions? So if I know that I've got 6 people in my meeting, to say, hey, Cameron, how you doing today? What's happening? How you doing? Hey, Dave, what's going on? Draw people in. And what we find when we draw people in, once they've already spoken once, what I found in my work is that they are more likely, in fact, 50% more likely to say something later in the meeting than if they never were greeted to begin with. That's just from a greeting. But it's, again, inviting people to be a part of what we're doing, as opposed to just, taking the meeting and talking for an hour. Some of the other things that to make sure that we do when we're in meetings is to make sure that we don't take silence as an answer, or silence to mean agreement. Silence, if I say to you, does everybody agree with that? Okay, great, let's move on. That happens a lot in meetings. I was just in a meeting last week where that happened, and people were not in agreement. It's just that people don't feel safe or know how to chime in, or maybe they've got their mute button on. So we can't take silence as agreement. If you're in a meeting and you need to find out if people, what people think, ask them, poll them, take it as a given on these kinds of meetings to say, Cameron, what do you think? Melissa, what do you think? And make sure that you're asking people and drawing them out so that we don't make assumptions that everybody is agreeing with us when they're not, or that nobody has anything to say. Some of the other things to make sure you do is to make sure you as a leader, and you, even if you're just attending the meeting, set a good example for other people. If I'm sitting here and I'm looking through books and I don't look like I'm paying attention when other people are talking, it's unlikely that they're going to pay attention when I'm talking. It's too easy for us to attend to, again, this is because we're social creatures and this is how we're wired. It's much easier to attend to what's in our space, what's right here in front of us, than to what might be going on virtually, right? So if my dog starts barking here, it's easy for me to get distracted by that. If I'm distracted and I'm the one trying to do the talking, the chances are you're going to get distracted too. So I have to model good behavior by trying to create a space where I am safe and paying attention and able to put my focus right on the meeting and what's going on virtually. And that'll help draw other people to do the same, to help everybody stay in focus on the meeting. So those are the kinds of things that can help a lot. Some of the other things that I guess I want to mention to try to help us do better in this time frame is to just also remember that breaks are important. This is a very tiring, again, thing to try to talk into a screen all day and to attend to a screen all day. So being sure to take breaks, to take a walk, to go outside, to pet your dog, pet your cat, do whatever it takes to try to give yourself a little bit of a break. To stay focused and expect to stay focused on a screen all day is just it's not helpful to us, and it's certainly not going to be helpful for our productivity going forward. Some other things that I have found in my work that can help a lot is, let's not forget that, again, one of the things that makes working together fun is our relationships with each other. If we don't really make our virtual teams feel like teams, we get less participation. It's not fun to be on a call where you, again, feel like you don't really belong, or you don't know if anybody even cares if you're there. I've been on a few of those meetings recently, and it just reminds me again of the kinds of things that have come out of the research, which is that the more we can create a team identity, even online, the better we're going to be. So if you've got a set meeting that has to be, every week, give yourselves a name. I have a board meeting, a board group that I belong to. We've named ourselves the Lindsay Quad meeting, and we feel like, we've got little t-shirts we made up just to be silly, but it helps because I never see them. I don't get to see them in person. So by having a little moniker, an alias that we set up, we text back and forth, there's a way that I feel like I belong to something, as opposed to sort of just being a virtual box on a screen, or just a voice that's sort of disembodied. So ways that we can create a sense of team, a sense of belonging, really helps a lot, because that is such a human need. And I guess the last thing I want to talk about is really about creating this sense of how do you have some of that casual talk that you might normally want to have if you were, again, face-to-face. It turns out in most meetings, if you look at face-to-face meetings, and this has been studied for years, much of the work of most meetings when we're face-to-face happens outside the meeting time. Before, because we talk to each other ahead of time, maybe say, hey, what do you think, James, about this and this? Sue, what are you thinking about this and this? If that's the case, then by the time the meeting comes, we're just checking boxes, right? We're going through a few items, but I already know what people think. We've already done some of the most important work offline. or after the meeting. We all meet after the meeting and we talk about things. So that's the kind of stuff that we have to pay attention to, is can we create a sense of this offline environment where, I don't know, whether it's opening up, what I've been doing with my students at UCSB is opening up office hours where people can just drop by. And part of the drop by is there's no agenda. You could do that with your work teams. There's no agenda. Come by like you would in my office and say hello. Let's talk about something. And it can be spontaneous. So to have enough room for spontaneity, some ways of being available on a spontaneous basis, that can be a way to really get people to connect with one another in a more natural way. It's sometimes very hard, especially for introverts or people from various cultures where it's not okay to speak up, to come into a meeting with a lot of people and to be able to speak their minds. But one-on-one, it's much easier. So keeping those ways of opening up channels of communication that are away from just the formal settings can help a lot during this time. Okay, well, that's kind of what I wanted to go through. There's lots more I can tell you, but I will refer to any questions you might have so that we can make sure I'm addressing what you need. Yeah, some people are talking about the virtual water cooler. That is for sure, again, one of those things that we need to figure out how to do. As I said, sometimes those open channels that we can keep between, whether it's on Zoom, whether it's on any other kind of tool, any way that we can keep an open channel between us is helpful. Any other questions? Oh yeah, one of the other things that that I was going to speak about that I can talk a little bit about is one of the things that can be really distracting and kind of bust any meeting, let me tell you, is what we call breaking the frame of the meeting. This is there's a lot of sociologists who talk about this idea of interactions have sort of a frame around them, right? When we go to a classroom, you kind of know what interaction's supposed to look like inside of a classroom. When you go to a meeting in an office, you kind of know what behavior's acceptable or not acceptable in that situation. But when we're trying to meet online or teaching a class online, the frame is harder to keep. In other words, I'm here teaching in my office downstairs in my own home. What happens, again, when my dog starts barking or the FedEx guy comes to the door and is ringing the bell? All of a sudden, those outside noises point out that I'm not in a work environment. I'm here in my house. If my child comes in screaming and crying, once again, I don't get to be the professor leading a talk. I have to be a mom. And all of a sudden, that whole frame of what we do that keeps home life and work life separate, it just breaks. And that's a hard thing. And again, that's one of those things that we want to say that that's fine, and it is fine. We have to accept that that's going to happen. But because of this, it's hard for people, for all of us, to stay focused and to not get distracted, even as watchers, from what's supposed to be going on in this meeting, what's supposed to be going on at this time. Especially if I'm trying to enact a role as the leader of a team and I'm being all tough and I'm trying to say, yeah, we got to meet these deadlines. And all of a sudden my kid comes in and she's crying. It's hard for you to kind of take me as seriously as before. It can humanize me, but it can also be distracting. So there's a way where we all have to cut ourselves a little slack ourselves, but also cut our leaders a little bit of slack and the people around us a little bit of slack. All of those things are going to be distracting. All of those things are going to take energy from us. And the best we can do is try to block off as much of that as possible. Usually I tell people to have a designated space that is their office, that is their place of work, to try to close the door to the rest of the family, the rest of what's going on in the world, to do your best to keep it to keep it as sacred a spot as you can, so that you can just focus on work, and work can just focus on you. Those things are really helpful to do. And I know it's hard if you're in an apartment or you're in a small space that you're sharing with other people. And as I said, these are just best practices. We do the best we can. And I think that other part of it is remembering we're all human and that we all do have this issue going on right now. So the more we can try to go with the flow a little bit, the better, I think, for all of us, and the less stressful. Okay, we got the question of how can leaders create a greater sense of identity for the remote teams? I've mentioned a couple. One is really simple. Create silly things like email aliases. When I was doing my research, it was amazing to me to compare teams that had little monikers for their team and that used those aliases even on their emails, but also, they'd start the meeting, hey, team, project one, how are we doing? I do that now with teams I'm leading currently. And it's amazing how much people begin to identify with that team, begin to identify as, even though it seems sort of silly. But again, if you remember that belonging is one of the key needs that we as humans have. We want to belong. So having any indications of that, whether it's just a moniker, whether it's something that's an alias on your email, whether it's t-shirts, if you can do them for your remote teammates, whether it's little logos that you put on your, that we can all share, that sort of name who we are. All of those things can help us bond with each other, can help us feel like we're in some kind of elite or exclusive club. And while that might sound really strange, that is just, again, how we are wired. We like to know that we're on the inner circle, that we're the in group, and that, there's sort of this other that's out there. Now that can be used to bad effects too, but in terms of our teamwork, it can help us quite a bit. Yeah, some people are saying that people get nicknames and such, and that can help too. Again, that sense that we are, again, not just talking to boxes, not just talking to boxes on a screen, or not just talking to faceless individuals. The more we feel like we are a group, that's, again, anything that we can do to symbolize that. Names, logos, a little cheerleading from the leader that we are team blank, whatever that is, all of those things can help quite a bit. Yes, photos help a lot. A lot of sharing, again, helps a lot. And again, I just want to also say, one of the things that I harp on a lot when I give talks is don't underestimate small talk. I know that it's weird if you only have an hour meeting and you're saying, I don't want to do small talk. It seems weird. It seems a little awkward when we're on video conferences. It seems incredibly awkward when we're on conference calls. But again, the value of it is building rapport, and it's also inviting people into the space. It's inviting other people to talk. It's easy to have a meeting with 3 people. As soon as you get above 4 in a virtual setting, whether it's on phone or video conference, it gets a little kludgier because the turn taking's a little funky. Who's next? Who's speaking? Who's not speaking? But that's why I say, if you can invite small talk as the leader of the group, or even if you're a member of the group and you just want to kind of help break the stiltedness, to be able to say, hey, how's the weather over there, Rosanne? What's going on, Cameron? How are you feeling today? Those things help invite people to feel like, okay, I'm a part of this. So don't discount the time you might spend doing small talk. It may seem like it's taking away from the time you have, but it may actually grease the skids in helping people work better together. That rapport is so important for me to feel like I'm a part of the group and that I should respond to you. So we want to make sure we're not giving that up just because we can't be face to face. Any other questions I can ask? Let's see. Oh yeah, how do you pick up body language on an in-person meeting? This is This is the biggest loss I think we have when we are not face to face. There is just too much that you can't pick up, right? When you can see my hands a little bit. I talk with my hands a lot. Sometimes people don't talk with their hands, and then we get even less information. You know, you have to recognize, I think we all have to recognize, this is a scary statistic, but about 70 to 90%, depending on the researcher over time that's done the studies, 70 to 90% of information that is conveyed when we're face to face is not verbal, Now take that in. That means there's a lot more going on. It's how I'm standing, it's how I'm using my hands, it's what's on my face. It's also kind of like little noises I make that, those things may or may not even get picked up when we're in a video conference, right? They can just be lost. So recognize that we're going to have to do more communication, clearer communication in this medium than we would if we were face to face. And that's why I say, again, you cannot assume everybody's on board with your idea just because nobody's telling you what an idiot you are. You have to kind of really call that out of them. Like, hey, Anthony, you didn't comment on this idea. Can you tell me how you're feeling about it? Part of what I find to be helpful in these situations, and I advise, again, our distributed teams that I work with to do, sometimes people aren't going to tell you how they're feeling in a group because, again, they're not going to feel comfortable. So if you can do one-on-one Skype calls, or Skype seems to be out right now, but one-on-one calls with your team members offline. So again, you might do your group meeting, but you may not have a sense of how people are really feeling or what's really going on. If you make a habit of checking in with your teammates, maybe once every couple weeks, so that you know what's really going on for them, how are they really feeling about the work that's going on? Did they have things they wish they'd shared in the meeting and they didn't? Those are important habits, again, to get into so that you're not losing out on that participation for that person. And again, I guess I just want to say it's like needing to do more work in this environment than we would normally do if we were just all in a room together. And so just recognizing it is going to be more draining. The more you can, again, anticipate that, take care of yourself in that. So by giving yourself breaks, and then again, slowing everything down, taking a little bit more time to explain things, a little more time to go around the group and make sure people are weighing in. All of those things can help because, yeah, you're not going to pick up on body language too well in this environment. Any other questions I can answer? Let me see what else is coming in that I might not have addressed. Anything else that we need to clear up?
I think there's a question in the question tab.
Oh, let me look. Question in the question tab. Okay. Yes. Taking nourishing breaks these days seems more difficult now than ever. What best practices do you give? Again, what's funny about breaks is that it doesn't take a lot to actually get refreshed. But what was refreshing for me may not be refreshing to you. I love being outside. I'm a naturalist, so I love going out in my garden and I'll take pictures of birds for a while. You may or may not have that luxury depending where you live and what's going on, but for me, that's a nourishing break. If I do that for 5 or 10 minutes, I'm ready to go again. For you, it may be a little walk, just a little getting outside or just strolling around for a while. For some people, it's, listening to music for a while. For other people, it could be just letting yourself go have a snack and just be off for a while. One of the things I guess that I'd like to say or remind you, I think everybody knows this, is this environment feels a lot more like being on, if you know what I mean. I feel like I have to, how do I look? Oh my God, what's behind me? I have to pay attention to what's in my space. I need to make sure that, again, there's not things impinging on this environment. This is a lot more work, right? So making sure that I give myself time to be like completely off duty, whether it's for 5 or 10 minutes every couple hours, maybe even every hour if you can afford it. It's going to make a huge difference for being able to just rejuvenate enough to get back on the call, to get back to work, to get back to staring at a screen. So just figure out what works for you, and whatever it is fine. If you need to take a little nap in the afternoon, which you don't normally do, maybe in a normal time, maybe you just need to do that. Figure out how it can work in your day. Figure out where you can get those little refreshing breaks. Again, mindfulness exercises do a lot. If that's your thing, running can be something that's great. So it's really whatever works for you. There's a lot of times too, there can be a lot of help if you aren't always the person that has to do everything. That's why I say even too for meetings or leadership, the more you can delegate to other people on your team or in your group so that they can take on some of the burden and you're not the one having to carry the whole thing for your team or your group, that can help a lot. So anything that will, again, give you a little bit of a lighter load in a time that's really hard, try, experiment a little bit and see what works for you. But I do a lot of delegating in my own meetings so that I'm not talking. This is probably the most I've talked in a meeting in probably, I don't know, years right now, because I just usually talk, break it up, and hand it off after about 10 or 15 minutes. That's for my own sanity, but it helps everybody because it, like I said, it draws other people in, it gives other people responsibilities, and that's all good. That's all ways that we can keep our teams engaged, keep our teammates engaged in the work. So it's not just like they're the peons and we're the leader. All of those things can be really helpful. Extroverts struggling with remote work, what can I advise? I think one of the things extroverts need more than actually introverts is social talk. So what's funny about that is I'm an introvert. I can kind of rejuvenate by reading a book. Most of my extrovert friends, that's not going to do it for them. They need some, chit chat. They need that cooler talk. They need to feel like they're more connected one-on-one. So I actually advise my extroverted friends to, again, take advantage of times between meetings to chat with someone. And I know that sort of seems like, oh my God, you're online all day. I'm going to spend more time on the phone or spend more time. It's different. It's different when we're just talking about home life. It's different when we're just talking about whatever it is that we're passionate about. It can actually be a little bit rejuvenating for us because, again, what feeds extroverts is that connection. And it's hard to feel that connection even in these kinds of settings. So extroverts, make sure you're taking care of yourself by giving yourself some chatting time. You find another extrovert. Don't call me because I'm an introvert. What else can I tell you? Any goal setting practices that would help with remote workers? Yeah, one of the things that can help a lot when we're working remotely is to make sure we are setting milestones and celebrating those milestones. So with a lot of my workers, and I even do this with my students. So I'll tell you, because teaching a class is a lot like leading a group in a lot of ways. I gave my students that I'm teaching this quarter a project to do, right? Well, even when we're face-to-face, I'll do milestones to make sure they're working toward the project, because otherwise other things are going to distract them. They're going to forget that this project that's due at the end of the quarter requires things to be done along the way. Well, oddly, for all of us in this remote time, those milestones become even more important because we need to know what we're doing today. I need to know that I have to get something done today. It's hard for me, again, not to get distracted by the laundry that needs doing or the dishes that are dirty up in my sink. And I don't want to keep doing things that are, again, in my sphere just because they're kind of calling to me in a way that my work might not. So having little mini goals that on the way to the bigger goal. So if our goal is to get a white paper done, let's say by the end of the month, we may need to have little sub goals. By this week, give me an outline. By next week, we're going to have the first paragraph or two written. Those kinds of things that keep all of us. And then, by the way, celebrating those things as we come together in meetings. So in my weekly meetings, I'm the president of a board of directors, and we're having a weekly meeting to try to hit some fundraising goals for the nonprofit that we're working for. We're celebrating even the most minute little win we've got, or the most minute thing we've done. We're celebrating that because we need that motivation. Everybody needs that motivation to keep focused. So I encourage you to use that as a best practice as well. Time management systems. Yeah, I haven't, somebody's asking about the time management systems and how that might work for remote work. People respond very differently to different time management practices. So I'm reluctant to recommend time management as people work in very different ways. So again, I think giving people some flexibility in how they get their work done, but making sure they're hitting the goals by time frame is helpful, right? But I tend to be somebody who likes to get up super early, do my work super early, and then be kind of like have some time in the afternoon to myself. So, again, what might work for me in terms of my time management system might not work for other people. So it's really about, I think, sometimes finding the tool that works for you and making sure that you're not working off someone else's, I don't want to say working off someone else's time schedule, but your own. You, again, want to make sure people are hitting their milestones, but when they do it, should be a little bit in their discretion given the very weird situations we're finding ourselves in. There's some questions about tools coming up that I'm going to have to defer on. Maybe Cameron will know a little bit more than I will about some of these things. The things for creating engagement, that question I can address. There's a lot of research that's showing that things that make a little bit of a gamification of work do seem to be helpful for engagement, particularly for younger folks who are much more attuned to that. But, we are such dopamine-driven creatures, meaning that, if we hit a goal and it goes ding on our screen, we get a little hit of dopamine and it feels good in our brain. And we're like, whoa, this is cool. It wakes you up. So anything that can help us feel like, again, that there might be a little bit of something like, oh, you've read, I know now my Kindle is telling me when I've read for 10 minutes, it gives me a little ding and says, oh, you read your book for 10 minutes. Good for you. It's like, I don't know why that's a great thing, but it is. But those little things can actually give us a little bit of a hit of dopamine, which gives us a little bit more energy. So definitely systems that, that or ways, tools that incorporate a little bit of rewards for doing something for a certain amount of time or hitting certain milestones, anything like that can really be helpful to, as we try to work alone in our offices or hit remote, milestones. Yeah, those things can be helpful to keep us engaged for sure. Yeah. So, and the other thing, as I would say, is staying engaged in remote work. Again, a lot of it comes down to understanding that what we are doing fits into a larger picture. So I do also encourage teams to make sure people realize that they are important and that each piece of their work is adding up to something larger. It can be really hard to feel that. As I said, if I'm only sitting here doing my little chunk and I don't really get to see the end result, I'm not really seeing customers face to face, I'm not, whatever it is, kind of making sure that we are together as a team celebrating the bigger picture. that is, oh gosh, thanks Tabitha for doing X, because that was really great. I was able to incorporate that, and now we've got this great thing over here. We've got to help people see the big picture of what we're trying to do together. Otherwise, these little things feel like chores, and we don't want to feel, that's going to be hard to be terribly productive and to do our best work if we feel like our work is sort of a chore that's going into a black hole. So the more we can see how that fits into the big picture, we can do visual things with certain tools that sort of show how, the work of various people is fitting together into the whole. Those things can really help us a lot in this time to try to help people stay engaged. Anything else? Advice for leaders that are looking to ease stresses for their people. Working remotely. I think, again, I can't tell you how much it matters just as leaders for us to keep acknowledging to the people who work for us, this is a sucky environment. This is not how humans are wired. No human, think about this, 100 years ago could even imagine the way we're working today. They couldn't. This has all happened. The ability to work the way we're working right now has all come on us so quickly. So of course this isn't natural in that sense. So give each other a break, give your people who work for you a break, and acknowledge this is awful. It's awful for all of us, and we're trying to make the best of it. So trying to support the people who work for you, trying to see what works best for them, and to try to allow them to find a way of working that will work for them. Maybe it's different hours than you might have thought. Maybe they do their best work at night. Try to make that okay for them. Maybe it's working 4 days and taking Fridays off. We may just need to be a little more understanding, a little more flexible with what's going to work for people on our teams than we might be if we were, again, all in our normal setting. So that's a kind of an important thing. Let's see what other questions. Tips for onboarding and integrating new team members remotely. Again, imagine if we were all together and we hired somebody. Well, let me tell you, if we brought them in, at least in teams I've been on, we'd be celebrating. Hey, I'm here to introduce, John, our newest team member. He's from blah, blah, blah. John brings this wealth of experience. John, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us something funny about yourself. We would be doing that probably face-to-face. We'd all be chatting with John. We'd all have, a chance to talk with him one-on-one. Let's try to figure out, if we're onboarding somebody, how we can sort of help them become a part of the team, much like we would if we were all in the same space. Let's talk to John at our first meeting, or whoever this is. I'm using John. I don't know why. That just came to mind. But again, to take 10 minutes of the first meeting that this new person is in and let them be introduced, you introduce them, be excited about their coming on. Let other people introduce themselves to the new person so that the new person kind of knows who everybody is. Have everybody welcome that person in the best way they can. Maybe even encourage teammate members to spend a little time one-on-one getting to know the new person, so that it doesn't feel like, man, like everybody knows each other and then I get dropped onto this team. Who are these people? I just had to onboard somebody last week on a team I'm on. And again, we spent, some people thought at first, like, why are we spending 15, 20 minutes of an hour meeting just introducing each other? Well, it really made a big difference to the new person coming on, because we all knew each other. We'd all been working together for a year. You can imagine how difficult it would be to be coming into that and never having even met people face to face and having to integrate if we don't do a little bit to help them out. Any other questions I can answer? Okay.
All righty. So I found out the problem with the lag, and just to let you know, Rosanne, Dr. Siino, your mic is muted right now, just so there's no feedback. But I wanted to thank you so much for doing this. This is an incredible honor. And for everybody else, she took the time and wrote some incredible quick tips for successful distributed teams and meetings that we'll be sharing with you after. And now I will be sort of diving deep into some of all the amazing the tooling that is readily available for everybody. So before hopping off, I just want to thank you again, Dr. Siino. It's been a huge pleasure, and we hope to see you soon. And yeah, talk to you later.
Okay, bye-bye.
Great. So, now we are going to hop in. Do you guys hear the lag? Yes. Okay. That should be better. All right. So now we are going to hop into the second portion of this talk, which is going through the different tools to optimize remote work. So let me just share my screen real quick. Yes, that is the case. All right. Okay, great. So everyone can see my screen here. I'm going to leave it in 2 panels just because that will make it easier for me to kind of just see what kind of comments you guys are commenting in these sections. So great. Let's start with just tools to optimize remote work. So there's a lot of stuff out there, the calendars, the automated virtual assistants. I've noticed that there's a lot of things that people are not using in their day-to-day that has made my life a whole lot easier. Just to give you a little bit more insight of kind of who I am and why I have experience doing this. I manage a remote nonprofit. We're working together to create a decentralized or a user-owned internet, and also decentralized stable currency are our 2 main initiatives. And we work with universities across California, starting in San Diego all the way up through Berkeley. It's 11 schools total. And ultimately, the blockchain space is the industry that I work in, and everything is remote. These teams are 100% international, spans across every single time zone. So you can imagine all of these sort of complexities that exist for managing these teams. So I've had a lot of great experience working with these companies and learned a lot of the best practices. So here are some of them. So first, I look for usability in a platform. So that means it's easy to use. It's just one click, one link that you receive. Like for example, for the Crowdcast, all of you should have just received one link, not a bunch of links. And it's just much more seamless that way. Next thing would be the features. Can you set notifications? Can you do, screen sharing? All this sort of stuff is very, very helpful. Privacy is something that I highly value because I'm noticing a pretty significant trend of our personal data being, whether it be weaponized or manipulated against us, is something that we might not be feeling the direct impacts of right now, but the more that we leak, the more it's becoming prevalent, especially considering elections and whatnot, but we're not going to get into that. The next thing is integrations. So yeah, how do your applications sort of integrate with each other? And for example, every time that I have a meeting, so this kind of falls into the next section of digital calendars, I get a notification 10 minutes before the meeting, just to remind me that I have it. And then the next 1 minute before the meeting starts, it signals to me again that, hey, hop on your call right now. And for me, I always like getting to that meeting a little bit early because it sort of stakes my interest in that discussion I'm having with those people. And the only reason why I'm really able to hop on early is because I received that notification. So, and that is normally integrated through my Gmail and my Slack. So I'll be kind of running through a lot of the stuff with you here. As you can see in the presentation slides, there is a link to every, essentially how to use Google Calendar, how to optimize your Outlook, and how to optimize your iCalendar. All these videos are incredibly useful. I like to watch them a little bit faster because sometimes they can get a little bit boring, but I highly recommend checking those out. These slides will also be made available to you after the fact. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Take time to learn the interface. That to me has yielded a lot more success and efficiency, and I just would highly recommend you do that. For calendars, I have a work and personal calendar. This is sort of gives me the ability to sort of segment my life, because when you're working remotely, it is very difficult, as Dr. Siino had mentioned earlier, to sort of create that sense of separation that we all really need in order to sort of maintain our state of mind in these sort of trying times. The next thing would be sharing calendars with your team. This has proven to be a really great way to just make sure everyone's on the same page and that people are showing up to meetings on time. I always highly recommend to invite people, so there's that option, and always include a link to the conference meeting in the calendar invite. This is just the best way to ensure that people are clicking the right link and are show up to the right place, because otherwise it does get really confusing. As I mentioned, integrating with messengers, that's always a really great tool to make sure that you're going to your meetings on time. Scheduling assistance. This is a little bit, I've noticed this being more popular in sort of technology companies, where instead of going back and forth a ton of times trying to determine what is the best time to hop on a call, these tools, Calendly and X.AI, are great ways to just automate that entire process. So if you can see here, there's it essentially says the times in which you're available, and it connects to your Google Calendar or whatever calendar you use to show the other person which times are best to schedule. I see this as a great way to set up those 15-minute water cooler chats that Dr. Siino was talking about, because it is very difficult to, kind of maintain that sense of sort of culture and community when everything is remote. So this is a great way. See here, this is actually it's a screenshot of my Calendly 30-minute chat. I send this to family, I send this to friends, just like, hey, it's been a while since we've caught up. Schedule a time, and it's always, to me, just the most straightforward way to go about that. And then team chats. So most of you are probably using Slack if you're working in a sort of small to large companies. They're all using Slack, and this is the much more well-known team chat application. There's seems to be more integrations with your Zoom and maybe your other project management tools. But I'm actually taking my company from Slack to Discord. And the reason for this is because, one, it's free. I love that. Two, they value privacy. They actually have indicate that their messages, I think you have the option to send encrypted messages. Not all the messages are encrypted, but we'll get to that later. And then there's voice channel, and I really like this voice channel option. I've been hopping on these sort of just like group work sessions where there's no real agenda at play. It's just like, hey, I'm going to be working on this exact project from 7 to 8 p.m. tonight, and I'll be in this voice chat. So feel free to hop on if you just kind of want to participate. Again, create a Google Doc, share that doc with them. Now it's pretty much as if we're communicating in person, minus the physical component, of course. So you can check out all the other alternatives here. I highly recommend it. These are incredibly powerful tools and will definitely yield to much more productivity in your company. Something for culture that I've noticed is, one, just has built great morale with me and the companies I'm working with, is creating certain emojis. So Slack and Discord give you this option to create your own company-specific emojis. For this case, this little there's a small red arrow pointing to a square with 4 dots in it. That is the company's logo. This just makes you feel like you're a part of the team. And I think it really helps build morale. So a lot of the times people comment these things when they to indicate that they've read something from their coworkers. And I've noticed that this is just a really great way to just make sure that everyone's on the same page about whatever you're talking about. And then next thing is, to build morale over distributed teams, it's that culture is tough. So I really love these sort of praise tabs or a music tab, just getting people to talk about things that aren't necessarily, deliverable oriented. It's more just about, giving someone the praise that they deserve after completing a great task, or just sharing music with your fellow coworkers that normally you would probably share in the office setting, but having designated channels for these sort of interactions, I think, is really, really great. It's always amazing to welcome new people into the channel. This to me is just a very clear way to make someone feel welcome. And then project-specific channels also yields a lot more engagement. So you're not, messaging people that the message that you're sending people isn't necessarily, it's just more applicable to them. So creating specific channels for specific projects is ideal. And then there's this fantastic integrations kind of suite called Zapier. Highly recommend checking that out. They give you the full rundown of all the ways that you can integrate your video and audio, or your messaging platforms and video conferencing platforms all into the same thing. So yeah, moving on to video conferences. This is, right now we're using Crowdcast, which is a great tool for something like this, but it's not the best for, one-on-one meetings. Right now, everyone is, raving about Zoom. In the tech industry, people have been using Zoom for quite a while, so it's been it's pretty cool to see it, kind of come to mainstream. And it's by far the most popular, and it's really easy to use. Again, one of the main things I look for in a product is just that you click one link, you go to it. It's super straightforward. The mic turns on, the camera turns on. There's nothing else you really have to do. Google Hangouts is also pretty straightforward and easy to use. And a new feature that I noticed that Google recently rolled out is that anytime that you create a calendar invite within your Google Calendar, a Google Hangouts link automatically gets created. Now, I see this as just a really strategic play to sort of cut Zoom out of this market. And let's see if it actually takes off. So again, really just an easy way to kind of communicate with your team. Cisco Webex, I've never used it. I was just doing some Googles and it seemed like it was the third runner up here. So if anyone has any experience with that and wants to kind of chat about it, feel free to comment that in the section below. Moving on to tips. So first thing, this is so important. Mute yourself when you're not talking. No one wants to hear the sounds around you, or the toilet flushing, or whatever it may be when you are not talking. Just Zoom etiquette or video conferencing etiquette. So make sure to do that, and don't feel bad to tell somebody else to mute themselves if they're, you just hear all the stuff going on in the background. Recording important Zoom meetings is also a great practice to get into. This has helped me kind of be able to go back anytime. For example, we record all of our board meetings for the nonprofit, and when we write our minutes, it's very, very clear, who said what did they say. We can even go back to listen to this, the tone of the person. As Dr. Siino had mentioned earlier, it's even though there might not be, not everyone agrees or vocalizes agreement, you should go back and check, or just make sure that people are on the same page. And I think recording the meeting to go back to it later is one of the best ways to do so. Putting webcam at eye level, a lot of laptops already have it this way, but if you are using webcam on your desktop, highly recommend that you just make sure to put it on eye level. Getting the lighting in front of you is also really important. If the lighting was behind me, you'd kind of just see like a silhouette of me. So it's always best to have the lighting in front of the computer, as if you just turn your brightness up really, really high. And as Dr. Siino also had mentioned earlier, making sure everyone talks in the beginning is so important, just to ensure that people are going to stay engaged during the conversation. you don't really know if they're there, if their mic and camera are off. And I think just getting everyone to talk at first, at least a little bit, say, hey, how you doing? How's your day going? Even though it might seem very sort of high level, it really does help. And I've noticed personally yield more engagement. So if you can see here, there's the gallery view. This is just a great way to be able to see everybody in the chat. There is, actually, I did not include a link to how to set this up in the follow-up email in the conference. I'll include a document with some of these best practices with links that you can click. So highly recommend putting it in gallery view to just see everybody. And also sharing your screen. This is just a great way to, as I'm doing right now, show you what I've been working on. So all of this stuff is pretty, is really important, but something that might even be more important for the long term is your privacy and security. Right now, our data, we don't know really what's happening to it. It's hard to sort of quantify who has what information of yours. So here's just some tips and tricks for you to ensure that your data stays in the hands of people you want it to be in the hands of. And also, how can we design a system so there's actually no way for, let's say, your social security number to get, leaked when, one of the main credit agencies has a security breach. So just some basic assumptions is that no company is safe from hackers. Anytime there is a centralized database, that database is a target. And yeah, no one's safe. Google's not safe. Target's not safe. As I mentioned, the credit agencies aren't safe. Nobody is safe. So it's not safe it's safe to assume that, any information that you're putting out into the virtual world is at risk of getting hacked or being exposed. Now, there are many ways for us to sort of mitigate this, but just keep that in mind. Google is a fantastic spy software. So this is, many people don't think about this, but the amount of insights one can gather based on, where you've been, what you've been searching, all this stuff. The reason why Amazon came to be so huge is because at the beginning, they knew that what books people were reading, what knowledge they were putting into their heads and that they were eager to learn more about. Knowing that, they're able to design very robust systems to recommend them certain things, and you essentially build personal profiles on these people to better. It's really for advertising, and to us, this is just it's a great. There's a lot of amazing innovation and great things that have happened, but it's time for us to start taking this a little bit more seriously because we don't know how this information could be used against us in the future. That kind of leads me to my next point of that our data is being weaponized. We've seen this in the 2016 elections, not just in the United States, but around the world. If I know what makes you angry, I can design pretty, malicious systems to get you to start disagreeing with people in your family or people in your community by feeding you certain advertising to sort of spur specific reactions. So this is why it's so important to make sure that we're maintaining our privacy in these times. And it's not really, everyone always says like, oh, why do you have to be so private if you have nothing to hide? It's not about that anymore. These things are falling into the hands of the wrong people. And it's really important for us just to make sure that it can't happen. So I'm going to be going through some ways in which it can't happen. And anytime you're on a public Wi-Fi without a password, it's pretty easy to gather a lot of personal information from your cell phones. So just keep that in mind. So here are some browsers that I recommend you using. And this is specifically important for the remote work talk because a lot of your companies, they have very sensitive information that I don't think they want you to be sharing with people who might not deserve it. So these are great ways to sort of ensure that. So Brave is a browser. It's faster than Chrome. It blocks all the blocks ad trackers. So for those who don't know, Anytime that you're sort of scrolling the internet, there is a lot of insight that your browser is taking from you, packages up and sells to third-party advertisers. So Brave is sort of flipping this entire model on its head and rewards the user for watching advertising. And I think this is a fantastic way to sort of give the power back to the user, and then it automatically can structure, so the publishers still need to get paid. You know, these people still need to make money for putting content online. That's advertising is how these companies are originally making money. So they create a really robust and cool model. So the advertisers are getting paid with the token. It's a type of cryptocurrency that is generated from you when you watch the ad. Now, this is built on Chromium, so it's using Google Chrome as sort of as its engine. Firefox is not, and this again has no ad tracking. It's all open source, so that's really great for security purposes, and it highly values privacy. So you can download any of these links in the any of these applications in the link below. On my computer, I have almost all of the browsers, and I like to separate my browsers between my work life and my personal life. So all of my work stuff is on Firefox, and my personal stuff is on Brave, and this is how I'm more easily be able to access certain accounts. If I'm tweeting from my personal account, I'm going onto Brave. If I'm tweeting from my company account, I'm going onto Firefox. And then Tor, this is also a fantastic browser. It's a little bit slower, but it's, I think, worth the privacy trade-offs. It's a nonprofit, so it doesn't make any money out of any of this, out of any of the data that they're collecting from you, which means they're not collecting data from you. And there's no surveillance, no censorship, no anything. Highly recommend downloading that and just giving it a look. Another great tool that I've noticed a lot of people are not using are password managers. I use a password manager for everything. It has saved my, not actually saved my life, but there have been times where I have not remembered my password and have been locked out of my bank account per se, when let's say I need to send somebody some money, and it makes it really awkward when I have to pay them and I don't know, can't get into my account. So to solve this, it's a extension for your browser, and you just need to remember one password, and that's your master password. And then from there, you can sort of create secure passwords to ensure that no single account, no single password is being used across many accounts. Is a great way to ensure that, let's say there is a data breach. I know there was a big one on Tumblr, where you can make sure that that password that they get cannot be used across any other account that you have, let's say your Facebook. If you are using the same password for your Facebook and your Tumblr and /email or anything with sensitive information, I highly recommend you do not do that, because again, all these companies get hacked, and it's best to have many passwords. So this is a great way to manage all of them. Check out these links. It's completely free, so up to a certain point, but highly recommend checking it out. The next thing is two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication, also known as 2FA, is a great way just to verify your identity. So many companies, especially banks, have started to enforce this for any time you want to access your account. So there's normally two ways to do normally two methods of 2FA verification, and one is normally sends you just to sends a number to your phone, and then you put that number into the application to open up your account. That's great. There are more security vulnerabilities there, because there are ways to sort of hack your phone to relay any messages that come to your phone into a certain database. So the better one is to use an app-based two-factor authentication, and Google Authenticator is great for this. And also Microsoft has one, and there's a couple of them. So check them out. I use Google's. It's very straightforward. The way it works is that the number changes every about 30 seconds or so. So no one can actually get into your account. They're going to need your phone and open that app in order to do so. The next thing is private search. So again, the amount of insight one can gather based on your searches is astronomical. what food you're hungry for, where you plan to, take your kids to lunch tomorrow, or what kind of, facial products you buy, or what kind of soap, whatever it is. Search is very, very, very important. So DuckDuckGo is an alternative to all the other search engines that does not collect or share any of your personal information. So again, I'd highly recommend this. There was recently, just actually 2 days ago, I read a story where now the US government does not need a warrant to browse your internet history. That is a big red flag to me, partially because, it's not a problem if people, let's say, were not, we didn't have, not necessarily, I don't want to make this political, but anytime that there is a person in power who might not have the same interests as you, or the fact that that person in power might shift so often, it's really important for you to maintain your own autonomy and own data security, because if there's a person in power who does not want you to be doing certain things, and they no longer need a warrant to search everything that you've been looking at, you could be liable for something you might not think is a problem right now, but might be in the future. One of the very best ways to do this is through a virtual private network. But before diving into what a virtual private network is, I want to just talk about what encryption is. This was actually developed by Netscape in 1995. For those who may have hopped in a little later, Dr. Siino was the previous VP of Corporate Communications at Netscape, and all this happened and was created during her time there. So it's really cool stuff, and really amazing that she was able to give that super insightful presentation earlier today. And so what encryption is just, it's essentially a private tunnel, or not a tunnel, I'm sorry, that's what a VPN is. Encryption is essentially just a way to ensure that no one else can see the material that is within a certain data packet besides the person who you are intending to see it. So what a VPN is encrypting the connection. So encryption is more the process. VPN is incorporating that process to connecting to devices. And so this is very, very valuable for making sure that nobody is stealing your identity. It can protect your sensitive information, especially, this is important. And I'd be surprised if your companies are not paying for a VPN service for you, for all the sensitive information that is maintained within the company, because this is probably one of the very best ways to ensure security. And what's a pretty cool function of VPNs is that you can make it seem like you're somewhere else. And this is really great for if you're ever traveling abroad and you want to stream Netflix. Well, Netflix, the content on Netflix is only made available to Americans. So this is a way to sort of tap into an American database to essentially what you call spoof the system, to make it seem like somewhere where you're not. Very important for places and countries that don't censor their people's information and news. The problem with VPNs is that sometimes it could slow your browsing speed. But overall, it's pretty fast. The slowing of speed is quite marginal. The problem here is that you have to pay. Yep, I know, it sucks. But there are some free ones. But just keep in mind, anytime that you are sort of using a free service, you have become the product. If they're not making money from you, they're making money somewhere. So if, normally that is through taking your data, packaging it up, and selling it to a third party, and you don't know really how that third party is intending to use it. So right now, we haven't seen, mass manipulation of the individual's data. 2016 election is debatably the first time, but this is just the beginning. We need to make sure that we're taking the proper precautions to ensure our own human autonomy, and especially right now, something that I've been thinking and speaking with people about is deep fakes. Deep fakes are a way to essentially make it seem like something had said something, make it seem that somebody had said something that they did not actually say. And this is that works because you take a lot of essentially video from somebody, and you can dock the video to make it seem like, you know, they're saying something that they never said. And this can be especially bad for political purposes. So VPNs are one of the very best ways to ensure that it's not going to protect you from deepfakes, but your data stays private and is encrypted. The next thing is messages. So, you know, imagine all of the messages that you have sent your family and friends, and, you know, what all the sensitive information that might be inside of them. That is available to the providers who are, you know, enabling you to do that, to send those messages. So here are some alternatives to make sure that the information that you are sending cannot be used against you later on. And again, it doesn't matter if you're like, yes, it does matter if don't do illicit things. I'm not saying that. But the argument that if you're not doing anything bad, why do you care? Doesn't really hold up anymore, because as we are seeing, the world is incredibly unstable right now. And in my eyes, everything is sort of shifting to become a little bit more autocratic and authoritarian. And you don't know if you're doing something that could be wrong 3 years from now. And I just like to take the proper precautions by using encrypted messaging services like Signal or Telegram. WhatsApp also does encrypt your messages, but it is owned by Facebook and actually uses Signal's underlying encryption protocol. So I like to use and support open source software. Open source software is essentially make the code available to the public in order to be audited and to check for security. So this is why it has better security. And then from there, people can also build additional features. You know, imagine just keeping all of the innovation within one company like Facebook, or enabling any developer out in the world. And again, this is the world. This is not an American thing. This is a problem everywhere. Actually, it's less of a problem here in America, but you may notice that if you're ever communicating with people abroad, they're using apps like WhatsApp, Telegram, and Signal to do their day-to-day communication, because there's a very strong chance that the government might use, for example, in China or Turkey, the information that they're sending via message against the individual. The problem with Signal is that there's just less users. The reason why I'm bringing all this up again during remote work to sort of tie it back is because the information that we give up a lot of the times is very sensitive in our companies. So making sure that people are taking the right security precautions is crucial. So I'd like to take a quick poll real quick. How much would you guys be willing to pay for privacy? Like, how important of a problem is it? So I'm just going to type this up right here in the poll section, because the general consensus, so it seems, is that people don't really care. So that is unfortunate. But if you can actually just comment what you think you would be willing to pay for privacy, that would be great. So just a little recap, other tips of how to sort of engage your fellow coworkers in this remote world. Use emojis and GIFs. Emojis and GIFs are fantastic ways to, again, sort of ensure that people are reading your stuff, so you can like comment an emoji. And also just bring some sort of emotion to the messages that you're sending. GIFs are also, one, hilarious and help build culture through comedy. And that is just a great way to make sure that people are staying engaged. Putting a webcam cover over your laptop. It's surprisingly easy to hack someone's webcam and not turn that little green light on. So not trying to scare you, but it's just best practice to throw a little camera cover on your webcam. If you are working from home and have that remote office that just recently got set up, but let's say maybe you're having some internet speed problems, it would be best to plug an Ethernet cable to increase the speed. It's just a great tool to use. And then if you're setting up, you have your home Wi-Fi, and let's say you have all these sort of like external devices like Alexas or smart TVs or Sonos, it'd be best to set up your Wi-Fi to split those devices. So a lot of new modems and routers already do this by giving you the sort of guest option or this 5G option. But if they don't have that, it's relatively easy to set up. I can include a link in the call notes after, not call notes, in the sort of follow-up email. And yeah, and then one of the last things is, again, if you are working in a company that's dealing with some personal information, your Alexa, your Google Home, all that stuff could be hacked. And it is important for you to have just a sacred, like a safe space pretty much, where you know that all this personal information is not getting, not personal, sensitive company information is not getting leaked. And that's pretty much it. To give you a little bit more context, I run a nonprofit that starts accredited courses at universities teaching people how to build a user-owned internet and decentralized stable money. The reason why this is so important is because with all these current systems, we have become the product. This is only going to get worse with time. When I say worse, there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences that emerge out of this. We've already seen some with sort of the rise of fake news and not really knowing like what to believe anymore. So ensuring that you are the only person that has access to your private information is really important. For example, if any of you have done sort of 23andMe, this sort of genetic sequencing swap, that information that is probably the most sensitive that you can possibly imagine, that is, you know, the only thing that is identifying you as you, which is your gene, is sitting on some private company's database that, you know, they might have a lot of great security measures and whatnot, but as we've seen time and time again, nobody is safe. And if in a very dystopic world, again, I'm an optimist. I'm optimistic that, you know, we can build a society that is representative for all. And but it's going to be a lot harder if people in power have very sensitive information on somebody specific or a group of people that is easily to manipulate. So it's best to own that information yourself. And so this is the sort of internet that we are working to create at the, it's called the Blockchain Acceleration Foundation, also known as BAF. You can sign up to our newsletter here. If you want to kind of stay up to date on, you know, what I'm thinking about and typing on the internet, follow my Twitter. Feel free to reach out to me on email, check out our website, our Telegram. And that is pretty much it. Does anybody have any questions? And I'm actually just going to, let's see. Great. So we will be moving on to the next session shortly. I just need to get confirmation from our next speakers. But if anybody is interested in learning more, we're going to have these sort of remote virtual meetups. The best way to, again, stay in touch is by following our newsletter. These virtual meetups are very engaging. We work with over, again, 10 universities in California, UC San Diego, all the way up to Berkeley, and really trying to focus hard on some of the most pressing issues that society faces today, which in my eyes are the ability to manipulate personal information for private gain. So that's about it. I'm going to, it's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Appreciate it. And we will stay tuned because we will, you know, go on with the next session. Thanks again for hopping on.